You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
I got Fantha.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
Hello, and welcome to episode 227 of Making Tracks, brought to you by those fine folk over at fanfatracks.com. I'm Mark, one of your co-hosts, and joining me this week is friend of the stars and film critics alike, it's Mr. Mark Newbold. Mark, how you doing, buddy?
I'm very well, mate. How are you?
Very well. Still kind of on Cloud 9 or Cloud City after our BFI screening last week. And I have with me the Acolyte Visual Guide.
I haven't got that yet. Very good.
DK book, written by Pablo Hidalgo with a forward by Amanda Stenberg. Flicking through it, all the interesting bits and bobs. Loads of Jedi names that just roll off of the tongue, like Aoife Pan. There's a lot of detail in this. Definitely worth checking out. You know, we talk about it with Andor, about world building. But yeah, you know, this was a different era of Star Wars and this was world building as well.
Totally. I'm really interested in getting that book. Well, one, it's a Pablo book. They're always interested. But two, for the exact reason you just said, it's that totally new era of Star Wars. They took a swing, maybe didn't quite hit the fences, but they gave it a go, set us up in a new era. Now, maybe if we don't get a season 2, but if we do get books and comics and other stuff from the era, that guide could turn out to be tremendously helpful because it does give us that visual deep dive into a lot of the tech, a lot of the, you know, the worlds of that era. So yeah, I'm definitely getting that book soon. Actually,
it was one of those books that had been delayed. Like, I mean, I pre-ordered it. It was pushed, and then I got an email saying, "Oh, it's been pushed to like September," and then it was like pushed to January, and then it arrived. So it was like one of those weird kind of Amazon things, you know. But hey, it's so I'm glad I've got it, and it can join the other visual dictionaries and stuff, visual guides as they're now called, rather than dictionaries. So what have we got in the news today?
So recently, Mark Hamill made it very clear that he believes his journey as Luke Skywalker is at an end. And speaking on Today, he reiterated that. He says that he thinks that The Last Jedi really was the end of the road for him. Complete closure is the phrase that he used when he talked about it. It didn't sound regretful. It didn't sound annoyed in any way. It did sound like he meant it. What do you think? Do you think if they came up with a reason for Luke to return as a Force ghost or some sort of plot device that brings him back? I don't know. I'm just thinking that Mark always had a tremendous amount of respect for Sir Alec Guinness, and the majority, 2/3 of his appearances in the original trilogy were as a Force ghost. Okay, it's a cameo essentially in Empire and Jedi, but it's very important cameo moments and, you know, expositional moments explaining the situation. Of course, he's in A New Hope far more. We saw that the other day. But what do you think? Do you think Mark's made the right decision to say that Star Wars needs to move on into the future?
We only have to cast our mind back, and there was certainly I don't want to say bitterness, but there's definitely disappointment, I think, you could get from him after the release of Last Jedi, and whether or not that was him channeling maybe what he was hearing and seeing online, I don't know. And again, time is a great healer, and we're almost a decade on from that film. I guess he's probably thinking, you know, the only way for Star Wars to really survive, I think, in the future is you either do one or two things, either recast, you just move on and you tell new stories, different stories with different characters. I don't see a world that you don't go more than a film or two without somebody like referencing what's happened, you know, either on Yavin or over Endor or something like that. Does that make sense? You know, his story is so ingrained into the DNA that I think it's always going to be there. It's going to carry along with whatever happens. I mean, it would be fantastic. And I guess the most obvious, at least to my mind, the most obvious would be like in the Rey film. He had a relationship, as it were, with Rey.
Yes.
But at the same time, maybe it's just time to let the Jedi end.
I just think back to Heir to the Empire, which is only 5 years, 6 years after Jedi. And Luke sees Ben for the last time before Ben fades into the Force, if you like. And so I think as fans, that's kind of locked in there to a degree. It's like, he can only kind of do this for so long. But when you think about Qui-Gon coming back to Ben, now you're talking 20 years since Phantom Menace. That doesn't hold anymore. So Luke given that logic and how incredible what he did in Last Jedi was to hold the First Order off whilst the Resistance escapes and gives Rey a chance to do everything that she does.
Yeah.
That is a possibility. So I guess for Mark's point of view, if there's something meaty to get his teeth into, I think that's partly why he was probably quite keen to come back for Rise of Skywalker, because one, it's the last, as it was, the last ever Star Wars. We know it's not now, but it was the last of that saga.
Last of the
story.
Skywalker saga.
Yeah. So how can you not have the first Skywalker that we really got to know so well as Luke?
Absolutely.
Be in it. But also, I think you think back to Force Awakens, and Hamill himself says, "I'm reading the script. It's going to be great. And when I come in, it's going to be brilliant." And then he's like on the last page, and he doesn't say a word. And then he does other bits in, he plays other characters because he's a great voice actor, and there's other stuff. But it felt like, to me anyway, Rise of Skywalker, that's the real chance that Mark gets to be directed by J.J. Abrams. And J.J. had come up with all these, these ideas and stuff. So that's how that read to me. And I think a lot of people, I don't know exactly how true this is. I think people kind of grabbed onto this and made it a thing that maybe it's not. That, we gave him the Mandalorian to make up for The Last Jedi. I don't think really for a second that was ever the intention. Favreau and Filoni were like, who else is going to come in?
There isn't anybody else really at that time who could come in.
And how well did they do it?
Exactly. But the only thing I think I could see happening would be a heir to the Empire type conversation between Luke and Rey in that film. When it's done, then that is the door fully closed. Otherwise, you can keep on wheeling them back and stuff. And I think the more you do it, the more you're going to lessen the impact as well. Okay, cue Mark Hamill appearing stage left.
Hello, I'm Ahmed Best, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Speaking of people appearing stage left, Temuera Morrison actually has a very similar kind of thought process going on at the moment. We heard from Ming-Na Wen recently saying that she's not in The Mandalorian and Grogu, but she's very keen to come back as Fennec Shand. Now we hear from Temuera talking about his new film, In the Fire of War. He made it very clear that he would relish a return to the character for a second season for the Book of Boba Fett. He went into it in quite a bit of detail. He says, I'm sad too. Where's the Book of Boba Fett season 2? Where the hell is season 2? I know they're doing Ahsoka season 2. I'm going, where's my season 2? Dave and John, I actually ran into them at Celebration. You know what it's like when you see the guys, they've got a look in their faces and there's so much going on. And I go, hey, remember Boba Fett? We had a big hug. And at the end of the day, I said, look, I'm not sure what's going on with you guys. But anyway, I had a great time, so thank you so much. And they kind of said, well, they didn't want to say too much, put it that way. They just left it at that. So he's basically saying that he's ready to go if they want to use Boba Fett again. He'd love to do a season 2 of Book of Boba Fett. Of course he would. Do you think that's something that the fans would want to see? Do you think it would need to be very different? Did Robert Rodriguez stick the landing? It has its moments. No doubt it has its moments.
It had its moments. Yeah. But do you know what? I think probably out of everything, the Book of Boba Fett is probably the biggest disappointment that I feel when I watch it. Because I feel like it's like, how could it not work? You've got, this fantastic director. You've got this amazing character. Yeah, it just kind of limped along a little bit. And I mean, it wasn't as dynamic as maybe it could have been or should have been. There will be obviously a small portion of the fandom who will be up for it. A lot of people will probably be like, so what?
It did well in the ratings. That's got to be said.
Yeah, it did.
The debut and the final episode, they did tremendously well in the ratings.
Yeah, and I really liked that final episode because there is something cool about a Rancor going batshit crazy all over,
Star Wars Connect.
Definitely could see a world where he could make a return in like Ahsoka or Mando and Grogu or something like that. That version of Boba Fett post-Sarlacc is very much Mandoverse. I would place a £5, maybe a £10 bet. You might even see him in Mando and Grogu, I think.
It would be cool. I definitely want to see more of this version of Boba Fett, but by the same token, and this kind of, unless they want to go down the visual effects route, it kind of precludes Tem being involved. I want to see a younger era Fett series. Even pre-A New Hope era, that Fett builds in the reputation of baddest bounty hunter in the galaxy that we've seen so often in the comics. And all the memories of the Dark Horse stuff and all the books in the 90s, all of that just showing what a ruthless character he was. And we've never really seen that on screen. It's never really been translated.
It's one of those weird things, isn't it? Of like, the character is bigger in the EU and that than he ever really is on screen. It's crazy. Talking about recasting, you get a younger version of Tem. How do we make this different from The Mandalorian? What's the unique selling point now that would make it different from a Mandalorian, other than the fact he doesn't have an annoying little green guy running around with him, right?
I'll tell you what it is, though, actually. I will tell you what that is very quickly. I think they softened The Mandalorian way too quickly, because when he starts off in season 1, he's a badass. And that little green guy you just referred to completely softens his heart. And so he goes from being bad to being a dad. And it's a different tone. So much of what makes Boba Fett the Fett that we know, Favreau kind of had the opportunity to cherry pick all of the best bits and put them into Mando. But they've now made Mando a much warmer character, a more thoughtful character. He's not as rigid on the code as he was. He's gone through a lot. And this is whether they want, we said this years ago, I mean, way back in Making Tracks, you and me, would Disney ever have the balls, I guess, to have a villain as their lead character and not walk it back? And I think I've got more confidence and more hope that they would do it now, because in Skeleton Crew, you had Jonathan Arwood, who was the good guy. Then he became the bad guy. We all sat there going, he'll turn good next week. He'll come good next week. And he didn't. No. He stayed the bad guy. And so now I'm thinking maybe they'll see that and go, people like anti-heroes. There's something in this.
Okay, so I've got a question for you. What do you reckon is more likely to happen? A season 2 of Book of Boba Fett or a season 2 of The Acolyte?
Whoa, that's a tough one. Knowing how expensive The Acolyte was, I would imagine cost-wise, Book of Boba was far, far, far less of a cost. But right now, if you listen to the scuttlebutt, people seem to want an Acolyte season 2. But I would say, I think if they made changes, if they changed it up for whatever reason and went in with a slightly different tone for a second season of Book of Boba, and maybe did a bit of that Calrissian Chronicles flashback type stuff to earlier adventures that link up to the modern day, I would say probably Book of Boba. You could really go to somewhere with that, with an older Tem Fett, thinking back to missions he had with a younger actor playing Fett back in the day.
You could have him sat on his throne.
King Conan.
Totally right. Yeah, just somebody like, could be Fennec or whoever, just some kind of Twilight. I remember the time when I went to Concord Dawn and all that nonsense and stuff.
Oh, that's a good shout. Now, we mentioned just a moment ago Kathleen Kennedy, and she has been in the news, as she always is. She was at the BFI screening of Star Wars. But also Tony Gilroy mentioned the massive support that she gave Andor and himself, the production. He said, she seduced me into the show. She kept the process rolling to keep me involved in the show, getting the show started to roll, approving all the wacky stuff that we did. She encouraged all of that. Our process with her is that she sees every script, obviously. She sees everything that's going to go out. We have everything on Avid where everybody's seeing everything. All major casting approvals, Isana Wallenberg and Nina Gold. Nina and I would come up with our candidate, the person that we wanted to go through. There were certain thresholds that we wouldn't waste time on, but pretty much anything that had any significance at all, we would run by her, by Kathleen Kennedy. Anything that had real significance would be a real community conversation, very little disagreement about any of those things. And he goes on to say, Benjamin Bratt, totally Kathy. I was like, what are we going to do? She was like, Ben Bratt. I'm like, really? Wow, that's fantastic. So sometimes really big swings and really big suggestions. She's our conduit to the money. So that has a lot of happiness and has a lot of friction. So at the same time that you're working together, you're having some very difficult conversations and moments about money, but there's no crying in baseball. It's a thing. It's a job. Everybody's under the stress. So Tony Gilroy makes it very clear in his own way, and we've heard a lot from Tony lately, which has been fantastic, that Kathleen Kennedy couldn't have been more supportive, couldn't have been more involved. And so my question, it's a long intro to a question, but my question to you is, she gets all the criticism in the world when something like Book of Boba Fett comes out that people don't connect with. And it's all Kathleen Kennedy's fault. But when Andor comes out, or when Mando Season 2 comes out, or anything that's great comes out, it's
mentioned.
Thank God for Dave Filoni. Well done, Tony Gilroy. And it's never thank you, Kathleen Kennedy. Here is the guy that's just delivered arguably the most successful, certainly critically successful series of Star Wars ever. And he's saying it's all down to Kathleen Kennedy. Do you think she should get her flowers? I know I certainly do.
Let's be fair, on some levels, without being around the bush about it, that's kind of why she gets paid with medium-sized bucks, She's, so like she's, and I guess that kind of is that, unfortunately, it shouldn't be like that, because I've always been a big fan of Kathleen Kennedy, and I've never really thought about, any of it is everything, like the whole process, as Tony said, but the whole process in filmmaking and TV making is a collaborative process.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to pinpoint and go and blame one person. I get it why people would do, because it's the same way as sometimes everybody would kind of point the finger and get the pitchforks out for George, because he's the focal point. He's the one at the top. And actually, producers and executive producers are there to kind of like, shield the creatives, be it, the directors and the writers and stuff. So fair play to Tony for kind of coming out and saying that. That speaks volumes about the kind of classy kind of guy he is as well.
Yeah.
He hasn't just kind of gone, yes, it was all me. I wrote it all and it was perfect, because actually, we know he didn't. He is a showrunner, so he's like no different from like Dave Filoni in that respect, and Jon Favreau. Kathleen Kennedy, unfortunately, is out of the sunset stage of her career. She's starting to get lifetime achievements and stuff like that. But I don't think that all of her best work is behind it. I still think that Starfighter and Mando and Grogu have a potential to be fantastic box office takings for the company, but also actually just really good films for us fans as well. It's different being somebody who's brought into a company to run it, and you are kind of having to learn on the job to an extent. Whereas George didn't have to. He just made up as he went along, and he had that luxury. Whereas Kathleen Kennedy's had to kind of like sit in with a company culture, but also the culture of Star Wars that us fans are so used to and so innately familiar with. There's always going to be hits and misses and bumps on the road. That's just inevitable in this kind of line of work.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Star Wars Fan Fun Day back in May at Blackburn, Ewood Park, Blackburn Football Club. I had the chance to sit down with Tom Wilton. I'd never met Tom. I'd never spoke to Tom. But as you'll hear in this conversation, we had a really good chat about his fantastic career. He's worked on all sorts of stuff, loads of Star Wars stuff. He's involved in Jurassic World Rebirth that's out next month. So here's myself and Tom Wilton talking at Ewood Park at Star Wars Fan Fun Day.
Do a little intro, because these all go in separate episodes, you see. So it makes it look like I know what I'm talking about, which is, again, a total lie. We're here at Blackburn Rovers Football Club. We're looking at the pitch. There's a game going on at the moment, I think. It was 1-0 to Newcastle, but it might be something else now. But anyway, I'm here with Tom. How has the weekend been for you? Because we had the meal last night, which was fun. I can only apologise, you were on our table.
Oh, I know. We really suffered, Mark.
You did.
I mean, I did asked to be moved, but unfortunately they said that wasn't possible.
No.
And that you'd actually requested that we stay.
Yeah.
So I thought,
insisted.
Insisted. So I thought, to be fair, if Mark wants us to sit so badly on his table, who are we to
Yeah. I mean, moving those place cards is such a chore, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We get the marker pen out to change. No, let's not do that. It was a wonderful meal last night.
It was great, wasn't it?
I said to the guys, I said to Neil, who's involved in the team here, the soup was one of the nicest soups I've ever had.
I'm pleased you thought that, because I thought that too. I really enjoyed the soup.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed the soup. I didn't try any of that wonderful looking black bread, and I regret it. I regret it slightly.
Yeah.
I was talking that I was like, oh, and then they sort of took it away, and I watched this little kind of roll disappear, and I thought, next time. That was a reason to come back.
Literally, small experiences are the best.
Right.
How much rubbish is this guy actually talking about?
We've barely got started.
Are we even recording?
We are.
Yeah.
Okay. You've just. So Derek Arnold has just interrupted. Apologies, Mark. Derek Arnold has just stormed.
I'm used to it.
And interrupted
I'm going to go ruin his interview.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Derek Arnold.
You're the worst.
Thanks.
Hey, you nearly ran into somebody as you ran off. That was entertaining.
I'm quite pleased that he almost ran into that person there.
This show, we say it on every interview. People who listen to Making Tracks will know this. We love this show because it's a family show. It's chilled out. It's laid back. It's very focused on the community with the charity work that they do. And we've been coming here for 10, 11 years now, and always have a good time. What have you made of this weekend?
Yeah, I've loved it, Mark. It's been one of my favourite, actually, genuinely. The opportunity to chat and just make proper connections with people, because for me that's why I come to these things. I don't just want to sit and do that thing. I really enjoy talking to people, and I enjoy having those experiences, and it's just been so lovely. I've met so many lovely people, had so many nice chats, shared, like lovely Mike and Emily who have been looking after us have been wonderful. We've had so many lovely chats with them about their experiences, and it's just it's been really lovely.
Do you get to do many events? Because I know you're a busy guy with what you do in your career, so do you get the opportunity to do many?
I don't get to do as many as I'd like to. In fact, I was struggling to remember the last one that I did. I mean, obviously, going back to 23, we were involved in the wonderful celebration in London. for Neil Scanlon, but I don't think I've done a convention since then. And you're right, it's been a really busy time, and so finding that, I think I was supposed to go to Germany with Derek actually and do one this year and had to cancel for work. So this is my first one this year for sure.
Wow.
So I don't get to as many as I like to.
It's nice though, like you say, that it's one of those shows where you can just sit down, somebody can rock up, have a little... we're so conditioned to expect that you'll just go, hello, my name's Mark, and it's an extra 30 quid if I put love, whatever, and then off you go. And when you can actually stand here and have a chit-chat, it's a joy for us as this side of the table, but I guess for you as well, you get that whole conversation going.
Absolutely, and I think... sort of stuff that's been reflected back to me this weekend has been that there are other bigger conventions where people wait for a very, very long time and they have a very, very short interaction with the person that they're meeting, and it all feels a bit like you're being corralled. And I appreciate that because of the numbers, but it's not really an experience that I would want to have if I was queuing, and it's not really an experience that I would want to have if I was on the other side of the table as well, if that makes if that makes
you're not going to be, you'll be financially enriched, but you're not going to learn anything from the weekend.
Exactly. So I think I think that there's a balance, isn't there? I was saying to lovely Emily, who's looking after me, that I watched Jim Carrey on YouTube, like a little clip of him talking about how when he's approached in the street now for selfies, he politely and kindly finds a way to refuse that and says, hey, listen, put that away. What I'm going to give you instead is 30 seconds or a minute of my time, and we're going to have some kind of proper human interaction here where we talk to each other, rather than this kind of slightly weird thing of like a moment in time, which wasn't really genuine because all you really wanted from me was this transactional thing. And instead, I'm going to give you something more than that, and I think that really stuck with me. I think that's I'd be more interested in having those kind of connections.
He's a wise guy, Jim
I think
Carrey.
he is.
I
think he is. I've watched a few things of his, and there's definitely some wisdom to be gleaned from his experience in life, I think.
You just saying about Jim Carrey, for example. I mean, you've worked with a lot of people on a lot of productions. Is there somebody you've not worked with? And I'm thinking Jim Carrey straight away, and he doesn't do a lot of work now. He's all but retired, isn't he?
Well, yeah, actually, Jim Carrey. Do you know, I wasn't part of the puppeteering team that worked on the most recent Sonic film,
right?
But yeah, if I had been, then I would have had the opportunity to work with Jim on that, which would have been really, really exciting. Derek and I, years ago, we did the ill-fated John Lewis Christmas commercial with Michel Gondry, who directed Jim in The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And so we did talk to Michel on that project about Jim, and I've seen Jim Carrey talk about Michel Gondry as well. So. But no, never had the opportunity to work with him in person, which would be a bucket list thing, wouldn't it?
Oh, totally would. And doing what you do, and me as like a complete layman in that sense, just looking at it from the outside, you've got the mechanic. We were talking at the meal last night about the sheep's mouth. You're bringing something to life, and as limited as it is, you might as well take the sock off your foot, and you can still add life to that.
Absolutely. So this is what I always talk about with the fact that ultimately, there was a conversation that was had some years ago. Andy Serkis was involved in that conversation. Mark Hamill was involved in this conversation about talking about. What is acting? Do you compartmentalize this and say you're a voice actor or you're a motion caption actor, and what they were saying, which I absolutely agree with, and I think this goes for puppetry and with creature performance, is that we're all actors first and foremost. Because just like you say, Mark, if you take that, I mean, because what we're talking about is glorified sock puppets. It's exactly right. If you take that off your hand. The hand is the thing that is driving that thing, and that's coming from you.
That's Kermit's mouth, isn't it?
It's totally. So the performance is coming from within you. So ultimately, they are all just slightly different versions of the same thing, which is acting.
Yeah. And so when you're on a set, when you're with a character, you're in a mask or whatever the format might be, are you always, there's a stitch of film made, are you sort of trying to figure out, well, how am I going to make this guy feel like he's actually in the room? Because as soon as you stop moving, it's a statue, isn't it?
Yeah.
But as soon as you start moving, you're giving him some life. Where do you work out where that is? Because I'm assuming every creature, every character that you do is completely unique.
Ultimately, in my experience, it tends to come down to how much information you are furnished with
Right.
at the beginning of the process. So we get very good, and we've had to become very good at creating background stories for certain creature characters. But that goes for any kind of creature performance or puppetry performance that I've done. You work with what you're given. Sometimes you have to work harder.
Right.
Sometimes it's a bit easier. But the more information you can be furnished with it, the earlier you can be involved in the process, the more rehearsal you can have. So ultimately, that really comes down to, it can come down to a myriad of different things. It can be the director's process. It can be how limited the budget is in regards to how early they can call us in.
Yeah.
All sorts of other mitigating factors. It might be down to the build time. You know, it might be that actually the thing that you've got to use is only going to be ready the day before.
Right.
So then it's like, right, okay.
I've got 5 hours to figure this out.
100%. And then it's like, right, okay, what can I do with this thing? And then sometimes you're playing, sometimes the first few takes, the first few camera rehearsals that you're doing that morning with this thing for the first time, that becomes the time when you're figuring out this thing. So sometimes you have to, so we get very good at, in those moments, working hard to get to that final kind of thing.
Yeah.
Smooth over those rough edges and try and make it as round in its performance as we can.
That's really interesting you say that, because I'm assuming if you've got that 5 hours and you get 3 hours in and you go, this thing, this puppet, this whatever it is, can't do this thing I want it to do, you've got to figure out a compromise. You've got to make it work.
Yeah, and actually what that can often do is those things. I can't give you the exact example because it's a project that I've just come off of, and so I'm under an NDA. But the idea of having practically something there that then, when you're working within the limitations of this thing, because it's actually there and it's giving the actor something to work off of, you get happy accidents. Things happen that you wouldn't if the thing wasn't there. If it was sometimes if it's a tennis ball on the end of a stick, or if it's just, or if even if it's just like there's nothing there, but you're providing dialogue or something for that thing. There are those that you don't find, those wonderful happy accidents that Neil Scanlon said years ago, and I really remember this. He said, limitations breed creativity.
Yes.
And I've seen that so many times.
The shark doesn't work.
Yeah.
The alien looks crap in full light. Yeah.
Totally. So we're going to have to do something different here.
Yeah.
And in doing that, sometimes you strike gold.
Yeah. I'm just thinking like Anthony in the suit when he couldn't bend his arm. So that's the posture for 3PO, isn't it?
100%, right?
Yeah.
And that came from the costume, which is a really lovely thing. There are other times when actually those limitations can become too limiting.
Sure.
And then you're actually having to really fight against certain things to create a performance.
So can that work the other way then? Can and this is going to sound stupid, or maybe not, I don't know, but can something be too good in the sense that there's no limit? There's always limits, but there's for your requirements, there's no limits to what this can do. I'm thinking from what you've said, it's almost like the little quirky wrinkles that make the character pop.
Yeah. So if you let's say you had something, let's say you had a puppet, for instance, that had lots of different moving parts and working parts to it. If that thing was a ragdoll, then you're actually going to have to work an awful lot harder to generate that muscularity of that creature. So you want some resistance. You don't want it to be too perfect.
Yeah.
You need. It's like the sweet spot. Sometimes you end up with a creature puppet where you're like, this is the sweet spot. It's giving me just enough resistance, but also it's moving in a way that is really complementary to the performance that I want to give right now.
Yeah.
And when you get one of those, you feel very lucky.
So have you had a scenario, not about current projects, obviously that's off the table, but in prior projects where you've done something and everything's felt right, you felt comfortable in the character, you felt like I can do what I need to do within this, I know my director's happy with what's happening and Neil's happy with what's happening. Has there ever been a character where you felt like, not in the pocket, because nothing's ever completely in the pocket, but you feel like this is where I need it to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had quite recently, I had a really positive experience making the live action version of How to Train Your Dragon.
Yes.
And I was very lucky on my team to be able to employ the services of Paul and Becky from Stitches and Glue, Paul Vincent and Becky Johnson from Stitches and Glue, and they make beautiful puppets, and I say in particular just because the context that I've worked with them most is within the VFX reference puppetry scenario.
Yeah.
But they make wonderful reference puppets, and we just managed to find the sweet spot on that one.
Yeah.
It wasn't possible, obviously, to have all of Toothless there all the time because he's a massive dragon, and obviously that's going to require. The logistics around it is too much. The number of puppeteers that you need, but also from the perspective of the speed at which this thing moves, when a creature becomes over a certain size, it has to become a VFX pickup because we can't, as practical puppeteers, make that thing move realistically in the way that creature's going to move. So we found the sweet spot with it, that we had a wonderful toothless head, and then we had modular sections of the body, and because Paul and Becky had made it, it all came together very nicely, and it was a very enjoyable experience.
And when you've got a creature like that where you're doing a portion of a creature, let's say a head or an arm or whatever, and you're working not only with the puppeteers and with the directors and the people physically there on set, but also, I assume, a company like ILM who are going to fill in the gaps. What's the process like there? Because there's got to be a collaboration between all corners.
You got it, 100%. So using the House Train Your Dragon model as an example. On that show, obviously, we had the wonderful Dean DeBlois directing, but we also had the fantastic Glenn McIntosh, who's an animation supervisor, who I worked with before on the Jurassic World franchise.
Yeah.
So Glenn's heavily involved in Jurassic World. And so Glenn was the animation supervisor on Dragons, and Glenn was just the most wonderful corner man for our department. He was constantly involved in helping us understand and find those performance beats on set, because for him, by getting it right on the front end, it's going to massively help him on the back end in regards to the way that they're going to animate that.
Yeah.
So the pipeline is the way that VFX refer to it. The pipeline in that regard is really key. And when you work collaboratively with people that understand that, it's a joy.
Yeah.
Because then you are in this environment where it's collaborative and it's satisfying, and there is this sense of like, we are here doing this thing, but there is also an eye looking forward to the fact that there's more to come. It's not the end of the journey, so to speak.
But all of you are working to bring this thing to life.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in service of the vision. Ultimately, the way that I look at it, and I try to look at it these days, and it is about removing the ego. It's about saying we are all in service of the vision of this thing, or this director, or this project, or whatever it is. And if you can, if you pull away from that, it's going to get sticky. But if you lean into that and you work collaboratively, I found generally it's a much more enjoyable experience, and the end product is better.
I love the thought of that. It's way beyond what my brain could compute, but there's just the thought that there's all these different people throwing in the character, whatever, to the character to get all on the same page to bring a dragon or a T-Rex or whatever to life.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Fantastic. I've really enjoyed this chat.
Mark, thank you. It's been a great chat.
Brilliant.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, mate.
Let's wrap it up. If you do want to still send in the question for next week or any other week, then please do. We'd love to read them out. And Mr. Newbold can tell you how you can get in touch.
Yes, I can, and here's how you can do it.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
And that's me done for this episode, Mark.
And that is me done for this episode as well. So, thank you very much for listening. Everybody, you stay safe, take care, have a fantastic week in Star Wars, whatever that means to you, and may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.